It is okay. It's buffering. Now just make sure it's live on Twitch. Because I am offline still. Okay, YouTube is live. Twitch is now live. Excellent. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Q&A and Critique number 23 in Arundel's server, as we meet every Thursday to talk about geometry nodes or shader nodes concerning a painterly effect that I'm working on for a short film that I plan to release in March 2022 for a client named DJ Unknown. So for now, we're connected here with Nefarious, Yush, Online Render, Okan, Shade Snoop. Nice to see you back here, and Spider Hank. So we're just we've got our agenda set, and we're about to talk about these topics and also take a look at a portfolio website by Zach and an art piece by Slink. So I'm going to hold off from the art piece from Slink for now to get like the open community opinion of the art piece until Slink shows up. If not, we'll do it later. But I guess we can begin with a portfolio website before we move on to geometry nodes and shader nodes. I have organized a lot of node groups for you guys to present so you can learn something about, hopefully something interesting about coherent stylization and a number of other painterly effects inside of Blender. So, Stev, are you ready? You got an open mic, right?
Yes, I'm here if you need me.
Oh, cool. All right, so I'm going to pop you guys the website link, and let's take a look at this portfolio website for Zach. He can't make it today because he has to work, but I'm recording this for later, so let's get it out of the way. He has a bit of a warning, all right? So he says it's a bit of an odd portfolio as it comes from a much more holistic design perspective than game design BA students, for better or for worse. There's a couple of sections that are still work in progress, like the About page, but he hopes it finds it interesting. So I'm going to copy the link and I'll send it to you guys. And let's take a look. And all right, so here it is. So this is Zach Silver Leonard, and this is his portfolio website. So we're here to do some comments and critiques. So take a moment to take a look. It's got this red and white theme. We've got a very large grid on my widescreen, and looking pretty good with 6 pieces and then a big wall of red. Got digital design, substance, Blender, Unreal, Quixel, Infinity, Creator, procedural environment, contact, and about. What happens if I click on something? It moves to the chair, has some nice text, and then we have the project that he worked on. The responsive design on the widescreen is nice. There you go. What's coming on all right. So, let's open up the microphone. What do you guys think of this website so far in this portfolio? I mean, other than the pieces, I guess
It depends.
it depends.
It depends what your target audience really is. Is this just a personal website where it's just work, or is it trying to get more work? You know what I mean?
I think it is trying to get more work. Let me just take a look at his messages. Second. He says he's making a portfolio website. The reason being, it's his first digital portfolio because he's applying for an internship at a game studio. And he wants some feedback for this game studio. So I guess this has the objective to get a job at a game studio.
I think if you're going for a job in a game studio, it needs to be a little bit more focused.
And how would you focus it?
Well, there's very little in terms of low poly. Hang on, I'm just having a browse at the moment.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, some of the renders are really nice, but a game studio is looking for optimization all the time. They want to see. I don't see any wireframes.
That's a good point, actually. Performance statistics, poly count, frames per second in the render engine, target render engine. Yes, you're quite right.
I mean, I know really some really top end modelers, but their polygon count's massive. You know what I mean? And they generally stay away from game studios. I think it needs to. It's a bit mismatched at the moment. There's no clear.
Yeah, there's no texel density or texture previews, etc.
And some of it's really nice work.
Yeah, that's excellent. I like it. I've always enjoyed Zach's personality and also his art style. He's played in the Blender Royale a couple of times and he's done quite well.
I don't know if I like the pink.
Yeah.
I don't know if it works or if it doesn't work yet.
All right, so I guess
I kind of like it on the
if you're specifically aiming for a game studio, if you want to go into.
yeah, you're right.
like
Yush, you were
that.
going to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, just to comment on that pink. I mean, I think on the homepage it's fine, but once you like start digging in, it should become a supplemental color and maybe not the full background.
Or even when you just roll over the page, it changes to a color. I don't know.
Oh, you like sections as well. So I guess
I love the big images and the grids though.
Yeah. I do. It looks good as well. On my widescreen, obviously things don't adapt very well. As you guys know, it's 29.9, but it does look great. Big images on the grid is great. Pieces are good. Are nice. So here's some recommendations. If your target audience is the game studio application, then you need to showcase optimization. You need to tell poly count, frames, show frames per second, show texture, packing, tiles, and setup, so that you know that you're optimizing your textures. So it's kind of more of a technical showcase. Show wireframes. That's the other thing, wireframes with normals. So if you have some beautiful wireframes, those are good models set up for your world, it's good. And also show modularity. What are the pieces separately? How could you use them as a level designer? How could you work them inside of a game? So these types of things are like, I want to see these as a game studio. That's what I need to see. I need to see you thinking about game optimization. I need to think about the poly count. And these are things that I need to see. Concerning the web design, you could use color to sectorize. Also, I would prefer some color and buttons on the home page thumbnails, I guess you could say. Because right now they kind of look like they're decorative. So if there was like a little hint or a call to action to check out those portfolio pieces, it might make sense. But considering the design, it looks pretty cool. The fonts, the way you've structured it, the way you're presenting the projects, I think is pretty good. Those would be my recommendations. Anything else? What do you guys think? You have someone in the comment. Oh, Slink says hello. You made it. Cool. So Zach's not here at the moment, so I guess we can't get like immediate feedback from the feedback, but these are a rough initial opinion. So let's move on, since we only have an hour, and we got a lot to cover today. So Slink, since you're here, would you like to open the mic and introduce your art piece?
Yes, hello.
How's it going?
I'm doing great. And you?
Pretty good, actually.
Oh, nice.
I'm really enjoying the trees that you have in your new piece that you've created.
Made with M3.
Yeah, but you're getting better at it. The
Yeah.
trees look a lot more natural than before. Alright guys, so what do you guys think of your initial impression of this art piece that we have here, of a portrait landscape? Let's move it to the center of the screen a bit more. Okay, I guess. Huh?
Nah, you can go first.
Okay.
I'll cherry pick it in a minute.
My initial reaction is the detail in the bottom and the texture does not quite complement the detail and the texture in the sky and the mountain. There's a little bit of a texture imbalance. But I like the 3 layers: sky, mountain, trees. And the color palette is quite nice as well. I will have some artistic recommendations. What do you think, Steph?
So, was the tree was used, M tree, I take it, to do the trees. And how did you do the mountain?
There's like a better version of Ant landscape,
Yeah, it looks.
which generates textures, so it's easier to make like some snow appear.
See, I think the snow is very linear across the middle. There should be some sort of kind of, I wouldn't say a grunge map, but you notice how it looks like a perfect line right across the snow.
That is right.
Yeah.
And it's not hitting other peaks. So, in the back as well.
Oops.
Yeah.
I don't know if Ant's good enough. I think it's quite good for
Nope.
just quickly generating stuff, but I think
Definitely not.
I think you would need to use procedural.
But
And
this
there's-
is like made with TXA.
I take it you're trying to go for photo real.
Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah.
volumetric clouds over the front?
I don't have volumetrics.
They are texture
Okay.
cards.
I made like mist paths
Right.
and composited it.
All right.
If it was like rigid volumetrics, my PC would die because the clouds are already volumetric, like real volumetric, and another box for the whole environment. My PC would die.
Gotcha, yeah. Unless you do the volumetrics rendered inside Eevee and then composite them back in.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's only a still image, you could. I mean, you could just use Photoshop and Photoshop clouds on over the top.
Yeah, the composite is very similar as well to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're quite
think-
right.
I think for using Ant and M tree, I think it looks quite good, to be honest.
And I also noticed the grass. You have grass on the ground as well.
Yes.
Very nice.
First, I didn't think it was visible in the render. Then it was, so I left it.
Yep. Concerning the tree generation, maybe the stems need to be a little bit thicker. The trunk. Other than that, I think it's fine. The leaves are really nice.
Yeah.
See, I think with M tree, you're only going to get a certain visual quality anyway. And I think that's probably the best you're going to get.
Yeah, to get to the next level, you'll need to buy something like the Grove 3D or something like that.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree
think
with you,
M3
Steve.
4 is getting somewhere.
I hope they continue the updates with 3.0. I really do.
Like there's currently one developer on 4.0, and he's developing slowly but surely.
Nice. All right,
See,
well,
I've got an old render. Put it in the chat.
But
Yeah.
I like, but at least I like that the clouds cast shadows on the mountain I have. That's the
That's
thing
good.
I like about the render.
What did I do that in?
Question, were you using references to work the mountain?
I was.
All right. Is this close to one of your references, possibly?
Close enough.
Close enough.
See the way you've got erosion and fall off?
Yeah.
Yes.
And notice the sleet on the close part and the small trees in the distance. That's one thing
Yeah.
that's missing from the image as well, is like the sense of distance feels like the mountain is right at the feet of the trees, meaning this
Yes.
mountain is like a miniature mountain and these trees are really big.
It's a hill.
It's a hill. It's a hill with something light grey. Also, your white snow
big
possibly needs to be
hill.
white. Yeah.
It's a rocky hill.
It's a rocky hill. But if you take a look, the white reflects the sunlight quite a lot, right? So you need to make sure your snow is super white and also broken up by angle. And it's very rough with the erosion, water erosion mostly. And close to the mountain, you got to make sure that you can see the sleet, that the trees become smaller the higher they grow because of the altitude change and the less oxygen. So you got to make sure that the foot of your mountain has some hills or sleet. And then from there, notice that you have like those grass blades up close to the camera and then really tiny trees further away in these rolling layers. If you do that in your image, it can help generate a bigger sense of depth inside. Because you have the depth with the atmosphere perfectly fine. Now you just need to work out those in-betweens. You have up close, looks great. Further away, could be improved, but you've got the composition good. But where's the middle part? You know, how do we understand the depth? And that's where you need to start to work the layers a little bit from the hills and things like that. But you're getting much better with your tree generation for sure. Really nice work there. Any other
I realized that every tree has a different hue, like in color. That one tree is like a bit more yellow, the other is a bit more green, a bit more saturated, the other less saturated. So I use like random per island, then random per object to get the different hue per leaf and per tree.
Which I think works really well actually. That's probably what makes them pop out a bit more.
Yeah.
I do notice here though that there is a bit of a pattern repetition in the trees.
Yeah. Those are the low poly trees, like in the background. For the foreground, I generally like 3 or 4 different trees, like really high resolution, and then in the background generated like super low resolution, 1 tree only.
Gotcha. Yeah, in
So
this case, what you could
if
do is
nobody
like...
noticed, it's fine.
It's fine for now, yeah. But in the future, what you could do is you could cut the silhouette of the foreground trees. And all in this part here, and then the middle part here, you could put some rolling hills with a lot smaller trees. Just climbing up the hill here so that they start going up the mountain where the sleet starts and things like that. And you make this part here kind of like on another hill behind this foreground hill. So you add some depth. But that would be my only recommendation really, but you're getting much better, especially with your asset generation for sure. And for terrains, you could use Gaia, which has a free version, and you can export, I think, like 1K textures for displacement, which is kind of nice.
There was an erosion plugin for Blender. I don't know if it ever came out.
Oh, it has actually, by Val on Twitter, right?
I think so, yeah.
He's active here in the community every now and then.
Well, I wouldn't mind the link to the add-on.
Alright, let me see if I can find it.
Can't remember. I think it was called Erosion for Blender or something. I can't remember.
Terrain nodes.
It could be.
Here it is. It costs $20 though. But what it does is it iterates erosion in real time using nodes on any geometry mesh.
Oh,
There it is.
That is really cool. Now I need to get $20.
My personal suggestion would be is download Houdini Apprentice and do the terrain Houdini Apprentice. And do the terrain tutorials, and you can export out the OBJ and take it into Blender.
Yep, that's the other way. You would also use World Machine, View, TerraGen, even the old versions of TerraGen.
Well, that image you're looking at now, I think that was View 7 at the time.
You did that?
Mm-hmm.
It looks great.
Spot the one error, but Oh, there's plenty of errors, but spot the main error.
The helicopter's carriage is down.
No, it's got no motion blur on the propeller.
You're right. It's falling. The engine's off. It's about to crash.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a moment in time.
It's
I think that was
stalled.
View 7. I was following a tutorial years ago. I think that means
Vue.
he's maybe about 10 years old now.
Vue's an excellent software for these things.
It kind of died off, but it went very quiet.
But it's still a very good software.
Yeah, I think it still gets used in production quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I know speed trees. A lot of people use speed tree.
That is
I
true.
heard of
You're gonna get the
Tree.
JavaScript framework now. My view.
I think
Neon software.
it went to silly prices at one time.
All right. Oh, they
Aaron
have
would
tree
probably
generators too.
gener-
Wow.
Aaron would probably generate the trees with sphere chalk, because he can.
Yeah, the last class
And
that we
he's a
had
mad
here,
lad.
there was a workshop about L trees just recently last week, which is kind of nice.
How the fuck do you do that? Like,
Yeah, we'll see.
it is like hard already with code, and they does it with nodes. What a mad lad.
That's right. So, guys, well, I hope you like that critique, Slink. I hope it helps you, and I can't wait to see your next piece. Thanks for connecting today.
Hey.
So there we go. We got the two critiques from Zach and Slink, and I guess we can move on to the meat and potatoes of this meeting, I suppose, or working on the short film. So I'm going to be showcasing a combination of techniques using geometry nodes and raycasting to create a pre-processing layered system. It is still partly work in progress. And I'm also going to show you the combination of the stylized coherence with the shader material, combined with the concept of a painterly effect that JC shared and Kalupsi shared with me the other day. So I guess we can begin there. So who here was present when I was talking about coherent stylization? Do you guys remember anything?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I've heard you talk of that.
All right. So I have the system here. In your mind, what do you need to make coherent stylization? What do you need?
Style.
Tiles?
Style.
Style.
Yeah, I missed that meeting, so I'm just going to sit at the back of the class for now, okay?
I know. I'm
You're
gonna
gonna need to hear us.
simplify it.
Sure.
But textures that properly adjust depending on how close or far, what angle you're looking at.
That's right. Okay, so what I have here is I'm just gonna like take a look at this single sphere here that's just sitting on the ground, pretty much like this. Basically, what I'm doing right now is for this I'm using kind of like a paint stroke system to create my stylization, and I'm breaking up the shadow to kind of make it look like it's painted in, and I'm changing the brush strokes in the shadow. And I'm also making sure that when I zoom out, that the brush strokes change their sizes as well. So if I go into my UV edit, make this a lot bigger, you can see here we can see like a constant brush stroke based on UVs. If I go back into my main view, if I look at the texture and I zoom into the texture, the brush strokes paint over themselves and remain the same size, regardless of how far away I am from the actual world. So if I zoom out, the texture on the paint is just scales over and over and over again, the further away it is. The other thing I want as well is like if I have this cube, for example, and I subdivide it, and then I decide to like do some modeling or something, extrude this out, and I make this mesh of some kind. Let me just unpack the UVs. There you go. The other thing is like, I want my object to have termination, or a very painted termination quality onto from the shadows. So if I look at the sphere here, let's just load a normal sphere just to do a comparison in 3D. So here's my normal sphere, right? We take a closer look, we can see that there is a shadow system going on here. A little bit jagged from the shadow settings. And it's smooth, right? There's a light side and a dark side. And then you have your bounce light, and then you have a sharp shadow, right? So what we need now is I need to break up the termination of these shadows by affecting the normal of the sphere. So if I rotate the sphere, I can see that the paint termination is affected based on the strokes of this particular material. And on top of that, the shadow is also broken up enough to kind of like bring out a different type of vibe based on that particular material. So that's what I need. That's what I have worked on, and also I got to make sure that my normals are breaking up the termination of the shadow, kind of make it look like that the actual shadow or the shading is painted in instead of actually rendered. So notice that like the red stripes are vertical, the yellow stripes are horizontal. So I need to make sure there are two different brush strokes between the termination and the shape of the material. And also I need a system to hide the seams as well, because I wanted to use UVs to kind of drive the shape of the brush strokes. So are you guys interested in learning how to do this? Do you want me to show you how to get that effect? What do you guys think?
Here otherwise.
All right, this is Eevee. Okay, so let's go into my shading and we'll take a closer look. So first things first, I'm going to quickly explain to you. I've separated this into practically 3 or 4 sections. I'll make this full screen. And let's make it nice and zoom. So I have my normal section. I have my texture source section, which uses my coherent distance node group. Let me just quickly zoom in. This is my coherent node group. This is a bit more involved. I showed some of it last week. So I have 2 of them working right now, one for the horizontal and one for the vertical. And then I have 3 different shader masks. I have the shadow caster for my alpha group, the alpha shadow. I have a shadow mask to drive the quality of my normals. And then I have the shadow terminator with a mask driving the color of my materials. And then I'm using a little bit of an emission to kind of like flatten out the material a little bit. And then I have my color driving up here, which could be anything really. I'm planning to use vertex colors for my shading of everything with shadow color. So where do we begin? I guess we begin at the beginning. The normals of the geometry. So if we take a look at the normals of the geometry, let's isolate the sphere, for example. So you can see the sphere. Here it is. And let's go select the geometry normals. So here we have the geometry normals, perfectly fine, hunky-dory. And what we want to do is we grab that and we use the linear light of my texture. So my coherent brush texture is just a raster brush that I created last week. And I put that into a linear light along with the colors of the normal. So this kind of distorts our normal by the brushes. That's the beginning. Great. So the next step after that, using linear light, we throw that into the vectors of something like a Voronoi, which kind of makes the Voronoi texture feel a little bit different. But we use the position vector data of the Voronoi to actually create the brush strokes on the surface, and this is driving the normal. So if we if you can, let's full screen this. As you can see, the colors of the brush strokes with the Voronoi as position data is making the edges of the paint kind of break up that edge. It's no longer straight, but brushed in, which is exactly what I wanted. So with that, we go and we mix that together. This node here actually doesn't come with Blender. This is an FX node thing, but I only use it to mix two directions of the normal. So here we have the vertical brushes on a Voronoi, and here we have the horizontal brushes on Voronoi, and then I use a mix factor based on my shadow mask. So I guess we can now have to go back from this mix vector, and I'll show you the shadow mask. So basically, a shadow mask is you get a diffuse material, which takes the lighting data. If we go select the lighting data and actually show the lights, there are no lights because this is isolated. Thanks, Blender. But as you can see, here's the shadow data. It takes the diffuse of the white and the dark of the shadow to create a mask. So I use the shader to RGB node. I map the range of it so that it becomes black and white a lot more, as you can see here. And here it is, black and white. And then from there, I clamp it just because I should. And then so that it's only black and white. And then I use that as my mix factor as the horizontal strokes and the vertical strokes. So now you can see in the shadow that we have the two materials masked together in from the shadows. I only use the simple diffuse right now for performance reasons, but it gives me an idea of how I want the two different brush strokes for the two different types of colors that I want to work with. And then we use that particular data to go down, 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 and go into the normal of my diffuse. So if we take a look at the diffuse, now it's going to compile for a moment. And here it is. Without any normal, well, as you can see, the normals are affecting the shape of the shadow. It's affecting the color that we have here at the top there. And I guess that was a big jump of data. So let's go back to my colors. So here I have one color up here, which is red. And here I have my other color, which is yellow. And I have multiplied them. Well, I should probably multiply this one too. Multiply it by a value so that I can have a little bit of texture. Let's make it even darker. There we go. So that I have two colors. And I'm using the factor of the top normals and the factor of the bottom normals, which is this grayscale image, to drive these textures. And then I bring these textures down to my color mix with the factor of another mask. So this is where we have to go back to my shadow mask plus the terminator, and I break up the terminator, which is taking this simple shadow mask, which is the diffuse, shaded RGB, map range, and clamp, is taking this and doing some extra magic to make it kind of interesting. So notice that this diffuse has a simple normal. So in this case, I'm going to take the diffuse and add the same normal breakup of the terminator into the diffuse, and then I do the same steps with map ranging, and I use two layers. One is a greater than layer, so if I take a look at the greater than, a certain value, it will show me that I have black and white. Actually, I'm using filmic, so the white is not white. So let me just switch it to standard. So black and white, it takes the edge here of a certain value of my terminator. So that's good. And then I take another linear light based on kind of a light gray to kind of get my ambient light of the shadow, kind of to mix it in. So I get a little bit of the world light to fill out the paint color. I subtract one from the other and clamp it. So I might not, whoops. Here, let me just finish, let it finish compiling. There we go. So I subtract one from the other, and then I subtract the original greater than from the other, so that I have some kind of power on, or two different layers of ambient light and not so ambient light. So I can control and tune these when I need them to be the way that they should be, to control what I need them to be. But obviously this is where I need to like create some artistic direction to control how I want my shadows to be. So in this case, my system is set up to be quite high contrast. And I use this as my mix factor between the two colors. So let's get the two colors and we'll mix them back together, and that's how we can see the two different colors working together into my data. So I use these colors into an emission node, which is just going to be like this flat looking color, and I loop it back into my diffuse, which has the normals, mixed in with a factor over here, which we're going to have to go back and take a look soon, into the transparent BSDF. Why do we do this? Because in Eevee, we need to break up the shadow. So let's go full screen. As you can see here, we have a lot of light actually. Let me just tone down the light. It's at 100, Jesus. There we go. So, as you can see, the shadows are sharp. The shadows look super 3D. That's not what I want. So I need to think, okay, so how do we break up the shadows? So unlike cycles, Eevee has a system of decoupling the shadows from the object to some degree in the material. So we're going to go to the shadow mode, which is let me just show you down here. So in the shadow settings, we have in the material settings, in the settings of the material, we have a blend mode and shadow mode. We want the material to remain opaque, but we now want to change the shadow mode to alpha clip. So alpha clip means anything that's white is transparent, anything that's black is not. That's practically it. 0, 1. And it's quite performant and it can break up the shadow. So how do we drive the shadow? Let's zoom out again. And let's go back into the material. So I use a factor on my mix shader node to drive a similar system of taking the incoming geometry with a dot product from, let's go take a look and see where it's coming from the normals that we created. So the dot product of the normals that we created to break up the terminator and the geometry, we create basically a Fresnel. So thanks JC, if you were here watching this, thanks for that tip. It was really nice of you to teach me how to do a cheap Fresnel using the dot product. You could use the Fresnel node as well. But if you take a look at the material now, we can see that the normals are created in black and white, and at the edges of the sphere, it's going black. And this is what I'm going to use to create my shadow caster. So my shadows are going to be cast, it's inverted. I'm going to cast solid on the white, and black is going to be transparent. So I absolute it, and then we use a greater than, using the same textures that we have from the shadows, the horizontal one, so that we have just the horizontal hatching on the shadows or a mixture. So now we have a bit more black and white values of the shadow system. And then we use the is a shadow ray from the light path as a factor to kind of drive what creates the shadow or not. In the viewport, you won't be able to see anything, but basically this light path as the mix factor between white and whatever's black from this becomes what casts the shadow. And we use this as the color, or the factor, I guess you could say, to drive what is transparent and what is not. So that ultimately, when we mix it all together, at the end of the day, and let it compile.
And wait.
Yep. Make a cup of coffee. Here we go. We can see that the shadow termination of the material is broken up. As if someone painted it in a little bit. Obviously I could tune it a bit more, but you can see that the paint strokes in the shadow is vertical and the paint strokes in the light is horizontal. Marvelous, wonderful. And if we zoom out, the paint strokes keep preserving their scale density the way that I want it to be. Great. And we even get some interesting Voronoi colors and textures and things, and it's exactly how I wanted things to be. And we can tune it, obviously. So for example, in this light dark yellow, we can probably bring out the shadow mask values higher, which would be here in my shadow termination mask. And we can tune it higher or lower so that we can have a bit more shadow color than what we used to. We could also bring out, let's take a look. If we want to change the greater than, or the color, like what color is this? White. Whereas that's the value of what is transparent, what is not. So we could go into the texture of the material with a mix node. So I'm going to use node tabber and just look for something like multiply. We can halve the multiplication of the texture. Let it recompile. And it will make the texture onto the shadow less pronounced. Or we can make it even more pronounced. Like that. I think I probably should. Let's see what happens if we clamp the absolute. Not sure why it's going dark at the edges. Yesterday it wasn't like that. But there you go. I'll figure that out later. So this is basically the setup to get this painterly shader, to kind of get this paint. I wanted 2 different types of strokes. I also wanted a concept of like, okay, so if I go back into my editing of a model, for example, and I wanted to change the brush strokes or the scale of the brush here, for example, this face and this face, I'm going to use Dream UV. It's a great add-on. I just fixed it so it's updated for 3.0 the other day. But basically, you can like change the scale of the brush on the actual model. You can even rotate it to however I want. And in the future, I plan to use flow mats to control the flow of the brush strokes on the model directly. So, for example, this brush stroke, I can rotate it again so that the shadow is vertical and the horizontal is not. Or I can rotate this so it can be diagonal and have a bit of control of how I want the brush strokes. So as you can see, the brush strokes are scaling. So if I zoom in a lot, the thing fills in with more brush strokes. No matter how close I am, I can see the brush strokes. But if I zoom out, you would think it would be super dense, but it's not. I zoom out and the brushes just change sizes and the object becomes smaller and smaller. But the brush strokes become bigger and bigger, as if it was painted in, which is exactly what I wanted. How do I do that? So I've organized the tree that I showed you last week a bit more to help you understand it a bit easier. And I made it into a node group, which I may release for later. So basically, I'll zoom in and go in here, and I've labeled everything pretty much. Even given you a troubleshooting viewer. So let's take a look at this troubleshooting viewer. And I'll probably use, actually, I'll tell you what, let's make a new object. New material. Sorry, new material. We'll call this coherent depth. And I can't spell depth. Problem. I'll use a node group. We'll call this coherent distance, number 1. And I will just highlight it. And zoom in. And I'm going to use my visualizer. Here it is. And okay, so let's take a look. Let's go full screen and let's me zoom out. So we have red and green. Now it goes green and goes back to red. And now it goes green and then goes back to red. Now it goes green and goes back to red. Green, red, green, red. Green, red, green, red, green, red, green, red. And if we zoom in and if I like make this plane, copy the material, you can see that it has these stripes. Zoom in out, zoom in out, zoom in out, right? If we get something even bigger, just to get a better idea of what the material is doing, we'll just copy this material and grab this and we'll make it like super big. How big you say? I don't know. 1,000 meters. There we go. So 1,000 meters, and no matter how I rotate the view, I have this distance programmed into my camera. That's kind of cool. So let's go in and take a closer look and see how is it doing this and why. Can you guys take a guess? Why do you think this would happen?
I don't necessarily know how to do it in Blender, but when we used to do it, we used to do distance to scale from the camera.
That's right. So let's go back into the shaders and I'll show you that that's what we're doing. So let me zoom in and go into the node group. So let's go to the beginning of the tree. We're getting the view zeta depth, which is this data. It's white, looks terrible. So let's logarithm it. It's still white, but that's base of 2, okay. And now let's just subtract it by half and we'll floor it to see if we can see anything. Why can't we see anything? There we go. So I had to floor it, power it, and divide. This is also thanks to Collapsy and JC for the setup. I don't understand the math 100%, but now that we've divided it, it changes a gradient into a stepped set of scales. So we zoom out. So at one distance it's really dark, up close it becomes whiter, up really close it becomes white. And it's stepped. And we use this to drive the scale of a UV. So I do this twice. I have one stepped logarithm and another step logarithm with the offset, which is this subtract node, so that I can change 2 different levels of the UV. So the scale UV uses values of a float, which is 0 to 1, I suppose, or whatever, 0.000, and it scales the UV based on the color of this gray. So if it's closer to the camera, the UV is bigger. If it's further away from the camera, the UV is smaller, and these specific lines. But the problem is, if we do that, and we take a look at this material, why is it black? Is it on the viewer node? Temporary viewer? I think I may need to unpack. Yeah, I think I need to unpack to see it. So let me just unpack. Ungroup. Boom. Hopefully the viewer works better now. There we go. So if we go full screen, there's a little bit of an issue. Oh, it's working fine actually. Let's see if this one has the lines. Nope. Alright. So if we take a look at these edges, we have a straight edge, right? Along the distance. So what I needed to do is I needed to create a system of ping pongs so that I can get a gradient between 2 different logarithms so that I could hide the seam. So what I use ping pong and some subtraction, 1 by half or 1 by 1, to drive the gradient at the top and the gradient at the bottom with a texture to kind of hide the seam. So I'm using a texture based on the UV, I think it is. Yes. Yeah, I'm using the UV. to drive everything else. So now I use a texture with a logarithm. As you can see, the straight lines here, there's a problem with that straight line along this texture. It's really noticeable, especially when you zoom in and out. And that's a problem that I had to create a system of masks to hide with this. So that when I use the combination of the masks and the textures, as you can see, it's now hidden by the gradient of the two textures that we have placed together. And I have a generated texture. So it's hidden now by the actual texture that I've used to create that system. And together we can hide the UV seams or use that for whatever purposes we want. So that if we look here, the red and the green, I need to make sure that this big, whoops, that's the next part of the project. I need to just make sure the UV, this is a lot smaller. Better Dream UV. I want to make it smaller and bigger. Smaller. Let's just check the UV. Oh, it's really big, small. So let me make it bigger, 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 even bigger. There we go. Zoom in. I'm not on the camera. Oh, it's still really small. Because it's 1 kilometer wide. There we go. So now you can see that the red and green are blending on top of each other and changing the relative distance with the subtraction and multiplication away from the camera. So that the UV further away from the world is about the same size as up close to the camera, just based on different zeta depth levels in your world. And I'm using a texture with the ping pong gradient with an offset of half in the zeta depth to hide the seams between the distances, working in the two same levels. So I'm zooming in, zooming in, zooming in, and everything just rescales and rescales and rescales itself, so that the scale coherence is about the same, no matter what angle or distance you are away from the subject matter. That's basically what I'm using for stylized coherence, and I will release this later. And that's how using that combined.
I have a question.
Yes?
When you use like an extra node from FX Nodes plugin, and maybe there are people who don't have
it here, so I need to replace that node.
Yes. Probably the mix RGB plugged into a normal and then into the diffuse.
But it would have to be 2 vectors, so it'd be like 6 mix RGBs maybe?
Nah, it's fine.
Yeah. How would it be? I would have to split the vector, split that vector, make another combined vector, and then use the same factor, mixing the 3 vectors onto the 6, then back together into 1 vector.
Nah, I would just use mix RGB, then mix it and then plug that into a normal node. Normal map node.
Normal map?
Yes.
Fortunately, the normal map node is very unperformant.
It is, but it is like an image about normal data, so you probably plugged it into a normal map node.
I just plugged it into the normal of the BSDF.
Yes.
Because I actually have tried using the normal map node, but the performance is abysmal. There is an actual node group that you can download, which is much faster, which I highly recommend, is to using the normal map node. But I have to figure that out later. So yeah, I have to make sure I replace that one.
Yes.
So let me just make it a color. Make it red. That needs to be changed. Purple or something. Yellow. Okay, cool. All right, so the next step. Have you guys heard of pre-processing? Do you guys still have time, or have we already done this for 1 hour?
Yes, I have heard of that.
Anyone else?
Steven.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, it's your time, so it's up to you, mate. I'm more than happy to listen.
Nerding Freak's like, blow my mind more.
I know. I'm just looking at your node setup and thinking, fucking hell.
It's taken me a couple of days to figure this out, you're right. And a lot of research and some good tips from some native shader gods like Collapsy and JC or Cubovox.
I
Don't
think I
remember.
found the custom node group.
These guys, they pulled me out of a hole. I was just making dancing circles. Like this shadow system was JC. And this normal system was Collapsy. So it wasn't just me to figure it out. The distance things, yeah, I kind
It's
of,
a whole team.
yeah. I take other people's ideas and I improve on them or make them work for what I need. That's basically it.
And then I call them mine.
But I can't.
say
It's not mine. Maybe the way I organize the nodes is mine, but the idea is not. The math is not. But that's about it, really. But actually, guys, I have been here 1 hour, and I think I can close the stream at that. Next week, I'll give you an advance of what it is. So let me go into the camera view. As you can see in my camera mode here, I see this like painting canvas, and I can kind of see through it. So let's take a closer look. I have this pre-processing layer that's taking the incoming data of geometry into the normal of a refraction node with an IRR of 2. I switch it to color and I drive the roughness of the canvas. So if I up my threshold, I can start to see the background a little bit. And let's change saturation. Okay, let's just get rid of the roughness for now. Let it recompile. It's going to take a while because that's a heavier node tree. Hopefully it doesn't crash. But basically, pre-processing is this concept. You take a plane and you put it in front of the camera and you tell it to become a color instead of an actual refraction inside of Eevee. So as you can see, here we have, well, let me just, there we go. It's working now. So here I have this blurry image of the entire scene. And if I select like the sphere and move it around, as you can see, it's running real time. And I have the whole scene is running in this blurriness with this plane in front of the camera. I zoom the camera in a bit more. This is called pre-processing. Well, I called it pre-processing because it takes what you see before the camera and then you process it as a shader using the incoming refraction node. So you can open up many doors. This is still a work in progress. So probably next week I'll give you the final product from there. But basically what I plan to do is the following. I go back into my shader node. I take the roughness and I use the texture of like this paint texture that I need to create, like this, for example. I plug this into the roughness. Take a look here. And I use this roughness to drive how the paint kind of like breaks up the edges of the material. So I put in a little bit of a threshold. As you can see, it starts creating this painterly effect around the edges of the actual model. So if we go full screen, on top of the brush strokes, it's creating any, as you can see, like here at the bottom of the screen, for example, or around the edges of the material of the objects, I can create anything really. I can up the saturation, or I can change the values. I can do color correction. I can like throw in some extra paint, colors, or designs, or splotches, or roughness, or whatever, to kind of break up my image or destroy my image even more on top of the brush strokes. So here it is, a little bit more exaggerated kind of to bring out that effect into what I already have in the materials. So if I zoom out, the brush strokes are preserving their sizes and everything is kind of like going crazy. Whoa, what's happening? So this is the pre-processing mechanism, which you can then combine to create a canvas. So if I, for example, move this into, let's just mute this, go back into this. I'm going to combine it with like a paint canvas. And I'm going to use a PBR material instead of the flat emission. We'll let it compile for a moment. And I can add edges to my paint canvas. I can use multiple layers of pre-processing. And I can use a normal map created from the paint to kind of, let's zoom in, full screen it, and start creating an interesting effect that is even affected by the light. Kind of bring out this textured paint look from the brushstrokes into the world. So if I zoom in, I can see the canvas vibe or colors and things like that, the paint bleed between the different strokes and things like that. And with some tuning, I can actually kind of create my painterly effect ready for animation, ready for the music video. So this is a sneak peek for next week, next Thursday. I'll probably try work to finish this. But I hope you guys found it interesting.
Definitely. It's
above my pay grade.
it's really, I know. I'm like, he's going to put this on Gumroad so we can buy it.
Yeah, maybe, why not? I mean, it's a lot of work to put together.
Pretty awesome.
So I'm getting closer and closer. So I've finished, basically, my goal was to basically finish this paint system. Whoops, where'd it go? Reset the view. My idea was to finish this paint stroke system. Obviously, I need to make it a lot higher contrast for the actual final image. But the idea is now I have my coherent paint strokes and my painterly, which looks nice by itself, great, but now I just need to work the pre-processing to give that extra oomph and actually make it fit on the canvas. And that should be next week. So there we go. That's it for today. Thanks for hanging out, guys.
No, thank you very much.
You guys have any questions about this so far, or is it so far clear enough? Or we just wait for it in Gumroad?
Nah, yeah, you lost me at normal map.
No, it's definitely awesome. It's, yeah, again, it's above my skill, but something I'd been looking at, like how do you get like a watercolor effect or a paint type effect in 3D. Didn't really find any good
Well, the key thing is
answers.
break your normals using a Voronoi texture. That's pretty much it. Or any type of texture really can work. And use that to break the normal of your Terminator. If you break your Terminators, then it starts becoming, as you can see, it looks like the shadows are painted in instead of rendered in. That's basically it, really.
Yeah, it's a great effect.
Yeah, in Lightwave, you have a shadow node that you just drop down. You can just apply a texture to it. Pretty much the same in Blender.
Yeah, very similar. In this case, we have to grab the shadow. We don't have a shadow node. We have to actually use shaded RGB, use a diffuse, and use that as a mask. To some degree, for the colors and things like that. Anyway, cool, guys. So I'll finish the stream here and bid you guys a great day. We'll see you next week, same time, same place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys.